Okay, I think we already started, right? Hello, everybody. Welcome to our masterclass training with Martin Whitman. As you all know, we come together every month, second Friday with Martin, and have the opportunity to have the insights and some valuable informations about our products. And today, Martin is going to talk about MagHealy, scientific fundamentals, so that we can understand principles behind MagHealy and maybe upcoming developments. I am also very excited today to see the content because personally I really love MagHealy as a product and I frequently use it. And additionally, MagHealy is on our radar recently thanks to the bundles in our new product line. Just 2 days ago we talked about Meridian module and made a nice analyze on Meridian in one of our trainings in Turkey. But I would like to hand over to our master, Martin, now, because he is the leading one today. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you, Aleph. Thank you. Aleph already said it. So we have to cover some ground. So lots of things about the scientific basics. So yeah, let's start immediately. So I will share my screen. And wait a second, I share the whole screen. That's easier, hopefully. And here we have it, scientific basics of MagHealy. Okay, perfect. So, as Aleph said, the MagHealy is really an amazing product. I actually also use it frequently, or not so frequently, because I usually use it when I have some back issues or something like that. So as I'm very careful in the meantime, I don't need to use it so often. But my sister also uses it frequently, also for, getting balanced again. So what are the scientific basics of MagHealy? And there we need to start with the scientific basics of electromagnetic fields, of course, because MagHealy is a magnetic field applicator. So what is the structure of an electromagnetic field actually? So usually or always you have, if some current goes through anything, so for a wire, for example, that's what we all know. So when I plug in my lamp, so there needs to go some current through the cable, and every time there's some current, there's also a magnetic field. So those two always go together. And if you have a magnetic field, you can induce also a current. This is used if you have this induction plates to heat your pan for cooking. There you have a current that's induced in the pan or in your whatever you put on the plate or on the stove. And then this magnetic field, which creates this current, actually creates heat through the current in your pan. So what does that mean for us? It means that when we have a magnetic field that goes into the body or wherever it goes, there's also something happening with charged particles. There's also something happening with current. And also that's how MagHealy creates a magnetic field. There's current going through a wire, and in our case, a coil, a rounded coil. But we will see this a little later. So let's look into the properties of electromagnetic waves. So since MagHealy is not only a magnetic field applicator, but it's a magnetic field applicator that can actually create pulsed magnetic fields. So the pulse is basically the frequency, and the frequency can range from 0.1 hertz to 12.5 megahertz, which is a lot. So you have millions of different frequencies that can be created. And in this picture, you see here, the spectrum where you see MagHealy, that's basically all the frequencies that MagHealy can create. So it's a low frequency spectrum. It almost touches radio waves. And if you go higher and higher in the frequency, then you, of course, also increase the energy in the frequency or in whatever you apply. And of course, if you go too high, or very high, you have like X-rays, like you have it when you have a broken bone or something. You usually make an X-ray to see if there's something wrong. And of course, there you need to be careful. If it's such rays, those can also be harmful, or gamma waves when you go to radiotherapy and so on. So what are the sources of electromagnetic fields? So they are natural sources, so the magnetic field of the Earth, and that's also what our body actually needs or is used to this magnetic field of the Earth. And of course, you have visible light. There also you have a field that's created, or lightning. And of course, we have lots of man-made sources of electromagnetic fields, and that's electrical systems like X-rays, Wi-Fi modems, remote controls, mobile phones. So those are usually don't have a very positive notion to it, because usually it's like, okay, those also Wi-Fi things and so on are harmful. So we also need to be careful what magnetic fields we use. And that's the good thing with the MagHealy. There we have a very low magnetic fields and in a very, let's say, healthy range. So what electromagnetic wave radiation are we using? So there you have the different, as we already had, different frequencies basically. And there you have radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, up to gamma rays. And we are in the lower spectrum. So this is not so much energy in those waves, and that's why they are also not harmful. So MagHealy is a very safe device if you look at the magnetic field. So that's very, very positive. Now, how do magnetic fields influence charged particles? That's a very important part, because it's usually how do magnetic fields work? How does the MagHealy work? And at the end of the day, as I told you, you have a magnetic field which always influences or can create currents or can influence charged particles. So if you put the MagHealy on your body, of course, you have lots of charged particles in your body, all the molecules, also the cells, if you have the cell membrane, and through those channels, there's always something going out and in the cell, so toxins out and nutrition in, basically. And this works with a cell membrane voltage. So there's also charged particles all over our body in every cell. And those charged particles, of course, we can influence. Yeah, of course, you can also measure, as we already had in hertz, you can measure the frequency of an electromagnetic field. And of course, you have a unit, and that's amperes per meter. So how strong the magnetic field is. And then, of course, there's also measurement devices. So, for example, in supercomputing, superconducting quantum interference device, so SQUID, they are used to measure very, very weak magnetic fields, for example. So I, in my study, also had magnetism in medicine, and there we used, or we visited a lab, they used a gradiometer, which of course you needed to have a very shielded room that not other magnetic fields are influencing basically this measurement. So it's a very difficult thing to measure something with magnetic fields. And of course, you have the magnetic flux density, which is measured in Newton meters per ampere, also called Tesla. And that's usually how how people are used to. So how much Tesla has an MRT, how much Tesla. And so that's for MagHealy, it's 300 microtesla, so a very small magnetic field compared to a MRT, but an MRT is also to get images, so it's a completely different use. And they are, of course, using a also completely different effect, which we will see later. So what does Einstein have to say about this? So, I mean, his principal formula is E equals mc squared. So energy is mass multiplied with the speed of light to the power of 2. So what he stated is matter and energy cannot be created, neither destroyed. So matter and energy are different forms of the same thing. So consequently, matter can be converted into energy and energy into matter. So this is basically a back and forth. And this means, of course, that every magnetic field has an effect on matter. So what does that mean? So at the end of the day, whatever energy you have in the world, if it's visible light, if it's warmth, if it's yeah, electromagnetic wave, it doesn't vanish. It's always that this energy, when it hits something, a molecule, your body, it is converted to something else. And this is then converted to something else again. So this means it's never lost. And of course, this also means that energy or magnetic fields can influence our bodies, which are matter at the end of the day. So now we get to how is it actually created? So how does an electromagnetic field or magnetic field, how does it evolve out of the, or how is it created by the MagHealy? Let's put it like that. So to create a magnetic field, you usually need a wire, and this wire is wound into a coil. And this is basically, as you see it here in the middle, so you basically have a coil and you have lots of woundings at the end of the day to create a coil. And in the MagHealy, it's a flat coil. So on the very outer part of the MagHealy, there are two coils that are actually wound to be able to create this magnetic field, or in our case, two magnetic fields in parallel. But this I will show you or tell you more about in the McMakin scientific basics. And we, of course, as we already have measured this frequency in hertz, and yeah, I already said that we have up to 12.5 megahertz, and with our two coils, those are, of course, two independent frequency modulated magnetic fields. Now, how are magnetic fields affecting our existence? So for once, we already had this a little, it's geomagnetic activity. So our entire existence is constantly influenced by magnetic and electromagnetic interaction between Earth and space. So we also know if there are special sun eruptions, then we also somehow have an effect on ourselves or on the whole world or also on the climate. And MagHealy is, of course, using similar magnetic fields to support you in many different ways. So the effects of geomagnetic activity on the human body. So geomagnetic activity has been found to correlate with human nervous system. So the human body responds to changes in the solar and geomagnetic activity and is synchronized with magnetic field changes associated with geomagnetic field line resonances and Schumann resonances. So similar effects we are also using to basically create the best programs possible for the MagHealy. Now we go a little further, and I don't want to deep dive on this because we have lots of other things to cover. So is based on electromagnetic fields? So there's this Anglo-Irish scientist, McFadden, that states that the electromagnetic field carried by the brain is the actual carrier of human consciousness. This is also known as the CEMI, so Conscious Electromagnetic Information Field Theory. So that's really interesting. I mean, that's always what scientists are struggling with. So where's the consciousness? How is the brain functioning and so on? And it seems that it's not so easy as they always thought. In another research, so Dr. Susan Pocket suggests that the electromagnetic field comprises a universal consciousness that experiences the sensations, perceptions through thoughts and emotions of every conscious being in the universe. So this is, as we know, or as we call it, also the information field. So it's a little more to magnetic fields and to our existence as we usually tend to think. So there, of course, how we basically applied this mainly is the atmosphere programs. So those are basically created, of course, with a pulsating magnetic field. And as we know, or as you should know, the magnetic fields are in theory eternal. So they never stop. They penetrate usually through almost everything, and they do not stop, but they decrease to the power of 3, which means they are rapidly decreasing in strength. So if you have a magnetic field, which is measurable quite high, in 10 meters, you might have almost nothing that's measurable anymore. And we also did a study on the atmosphere programs. And there we, of course, asked for the quality of life and for the decreasing concerns. And I maybe need to explain the decreasing concerns, and that's the MyMop, which is basically before a study, we asked the participants, okay, what issues do you have? And after the study, we asked them about their issues again. So we asked them, okay, how is it with what you said is bothering you? And this usually is quite drastically reduced. And as you see here, so we basically increased the well-being quite drastically. And we also decreased the concerns quite drastically. So when you look at the coherence D, which is the effect size, so how effective is it? So the well-being is almost very large, so the highest possible, and the decrease in concerns is if it almost hits the end of the scale, and that's very large. So, and the study programs in this case were holistic health and sleep. So those two were basically part of the study. So now we go to the effects of magnetic fields on water. This is also very interesting because, as you know, the water molecules are H2O, so two, what do you call it? H atoms basically, and one oxygen atom, so hydrogen and oxygen. And since they are a little polar, you always have an acceptor and a donor. And the acceptor, as you see in the right graphics, is usually the hydrogen atom, and the donor is the oxygen atom. And because of this polar structure, they are forming hydrogen bonds. And those hydrogen bonds are actually quite loose. So they are very, very subtle, not so strong bonds. So the water, as we know, is quite special in this regards because there you can have form clusters that can form. And if you look at this, yeah, here you see those complex water clusters. And those water clusters, of course, carry information. So it's not that all clusters are formed completely randomly. No, those complex structures usually carry information. And that's also what we're using. So we are basically transferring through the frequencies of the MagHealy water programs, in this case, special information into the water. And the water saves this information also using such complex water clusters based on hydrogen bonds. So here are a few other effects of magnetic fields. So of course we have a decrease in surface tension, which can occur with magnetic fields, an increase in viscosity, room temperature, and a change of the rotational movement of water molecules. And this is of course used in MRTs. So in MRT, you basically align all water molecules in the same direction with a very, 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 very strong magnetic field. And then you switch off the magnetic field, and then basically the molecules rearrange. And in the speed of the rearrangement, you can see what kind of structure you have in the body. And there are, of course, some effects that are assumed but not 100% proven. And that's, of course, reducing the intermolecular energy of water, increase the activation energy, and a change in the hydrogen bonding, and increase in the mean size of water clusters. So all those effects are, of course, happening in one or the other way when we apply a magnetic field to water. And now we come to a very, very special electromagnetic field effect, and that's the information in water. And the French immunologist Jacques Benveniste and also later Luc Montagnier, they basically looked at the phenomena that you put like DNA strands, so an information or something that carries information like a DNA strand into water. Then they wait for some time that this information is basically transcribed to the water. And then they remove the DNA and then they basically put in new, let's say, single parts of DNA. And then those DNA strands are reformed. So you basically have an amplified PCR, or you amplify this with via PCR. Uh, and yeah, you get the same DNA as you put in, but there was no DNA, there's just the information remaining. And those very, let's say, special effects are possible with water. And of course, we are using this effect in the water programs. And yeah, we understand basically water as the material form of the information field. So everything complex that's saved in the information field, so every information basically, you can also go to water, and water carries also lots of informations in all kinds of different forms. Yeah, and of course, water holds this very specific frequency spectrum that made the development of life possible on this planet in the first place. So we also did a study here. We used the same assessments. Of course, as study programs, we used fitness, we used energy and cell harmony. And we had also very large effects on both. So in the quality of life and in the decrease of concerns. So those were also very encouraging. Then we have the magnetic effects, or the effects of magnetic fields on the body. So if you look at the electromagnetic fields and the effects on cells, they can have, of course, positive effects. And of course, if you use too high frequencies or too strong magnetic fields, they can also have not so positive effects. But the good thing is MagHealy is only capable of the good things. Yeah, and in one study, they basically looked at the cellular level, and it has been shown that depending on the basically magnetic fields, there can be relative oxygen species, and those are formed, and they can lead to a very positive effect or to a positive effect at low intensities, which we actually are using. So, yeah, and here we come to this very nice example, because here you see that the heart is basically highlighted. And that's also where, when we basically visited this laboratory, when I studied magnetism in medicine. And there you can actually measure, using a magnetic field, the ECG of the heart. You know, all know the ECG that you basically measure. You can now measure it also with some devices, Apple Watch or some similar devices, so trackers and rings in the meantime also. And that also is quite interesting, because so our heart is basically creating such a huge magnetic field, because there's a huge current going through our heart. So basically that the heart pumps every few or yeah, every few seconds there is created a strong current which yeah, makes our heart contract. And when it contracts, it basically pumps blood in the whole body. And this, of course, as we learned, every current also creates a magnetic field. So that's why there's a huge magnetic field created by the heart. Yeah, and of course, also those currents and electromagnetic fields, yeah, are very, very important for our digestion, our brain activity, our heart function, and the central nervous system, because only through those yeah, redistributed charged particles, our whole body is working in the first place. And now we go to the classic app or the classic application, which is basically using or is made or yeah, is based basically on those effects. And yeah, and we also have a patent on quantum analyzed frequencies or on the MagHealy. So the noise source that's used there is also yeah, patented. So basically that you have an input from a body or a human and you get an output and then basically determine the right frequency. So this we already also patented for the MagHealy. And here we also did a study, and there we also used the decrease in burnout and the increase in mood score. And actually, when you look at the coherence D, that's quite encouraging because we have a very large increase in the well-being, a very large increase in the concerns, almost a very large increase in burnout, and a very large increase again in mood. So very encouraging, and we used the positive mood, which of course fits to the mood assessment, and regeneration. Yeah, and those are the references. And this basically covers our first part of this presentation, or maybe also the third part already. And now let's go to the next part. And the next part is McMakin, which is quite interesting. So as we all know, there's frequency-specific microcurrent. And of course, frequency-specific microcurrent is not owned by Karen McMakin, but she's the one that basically brought it back. And what you use with FSM, so it's two stimulation outputs in parallel with frequency-modulated microcurrent. So that's the origin. And those are basically transmitted to the body using electrodes. And now we can, of course, as we already had a few slides ago, create in the MagHealy two magnetic field frequencies. So she tested basically if the magnetic field if the magnetic field can have similar or even the same effects as microcurrent. And it cannot have the exact same effects for everything, but there are lots of things that actually work quite similar. Or maybe a little better for magnetic fields and sometimes a little better for electrical fields. So it's always the, let's say, application that's important, because there you can see if you either should maybe more use a magnetic field or maybe should use more current. Yeah, and here's some history. So more than 100 years ago, frequency modulated microcurrent effects were being researched and successfully applied until 1930, so the 30s. Why? Because there were regulatory changes. Because of course, as we know, the pharma industry, they had very, very large effects like this painkillers or other drugs. As we know, those are really like, okay, you take it, immediate effect, you see it, you can measure it, very good. But of course, with homeopathy, herbs, and microcurrent applications, it's a little subtle effect. There are also effects, but you cannot like measure them so very easily because it's also sometimes very dependent on the issue and the person, so quite individual. And 1995, Karen McMakin basically found an old frequency device and also a list along with it. And she then started to reignite this microcurrent applications. So what she did since 1997, she was teaching physicians, therapists, and alternative practitioners worldwide um, about FSM, so frequency-specific microcurrent. And many studies and experiments were also done, also in our clinical evaluation for our medical certification for Healy now. There are also some studies of her. And yeah, of course, it's a growing community, so she still is teaching, even if she's really not the youngest anymore. And yeah, and this technology now through MagHealy is available for everyone because that's an end user device and everyone can use it. And it's without cables, so not so complicated. So the principle, what is the principle behind FSM or dual frequency applications? Let's put it like that. So you always have a predefined frequency pair, so a combination of two frequencies. And they are running basically in parallel and 100% in parallel, not sequential, not after each other, no, in parallel. And of course, McHealy creates frequency modulated magnetic fields that are running two frequencies in parallel if you use a McMakin program. We can also just use one frequency, but for McMakin, we use two frequencies. And those are usually, so especially for McMakin applications, they are in the range of 1 or 0.1 hertz to 1,000 hertz. And that's also the range usually the human body emits frequencies, which you know if you saw my last presentation, I think, because I think there I mentioned this effect. Yeah, and you have those two channels, basically A and B, and they are basically applied to human body. And what are we doing now with, or what is the logic behind those two frequencies? So one frequency is basically the imbalance, and the second frequency is the target. So where and what, you could say. Where do I need to apply something, or where is the issue? And then what issue do I have? So the target and the imbalance. Yeah, and then you have this interference effect. So basically, if you have two frequencies that are overlaid, you have basically more or less a third frequency created. So you have the effect of one frequency, the second frequency, and the overlaid frequency. And that makes it so very special. Yeah. So instead of microcurrent, we are using this pulsating magnetic field. Yeah. And of course, since it's smartphone controlled, it's quite easy. And yeah, at the end of the day, you have a two-in-one solution. So you have basically yeah, something that creates magnetic fields, and in our case, two magnetic fields, very easily used with a smartphone. So now how do I apply MagHealy programs? So especially McMakin program. So each program consists of a description. So basically where to apply it and the total duration and the position, of course, where you put it on the body. Usually you put it on the stomach. And of course, there's also one very important part, and that's the intensity. So especially for the MagHealy, if you use 100% intensity, the battery will not last too long because it creates a quite strong magnetic field. So usually those McMakin programs start at 20% intensity. And then you increase the intensity as desired. So you should really not overdo it with the intensity if you want a longer duration of the program. Usually you should have something between, I don't know, 20 and 50%, because it's not ultimately about the field strength, so how strong the magnetic field is, but that it basically reaches your body or your field. And in this case, of course, that the frequency or the right frequency pair reaches your body. So it's more about the frequency and less about the magnetic field strength. So there are a few questions that are usually asked. So how many programs can I run a day? So usually you should run 1 to 3 programs. And this depends strongly on your personal fitness. So if you're already challenged, if you're old, or you have one or more diseases or something, you should maybe do only 1 program, and maybe only 1 program a week, always depending on your personal state. So you really need to see how much your body needs as a push in the right direction. So you can basically administer change by using those programs, but you shouldn't overburden your body with too much change at the same time, or too much positive, let's say, pushes in the right direction. Then the question, will I experience any sensations during the application? So can I feel something? And actually, usually you cannot feel anything with magnetic fields, because our body simply is not made to perceive, so to feel magnetic fields. Some can, but most can. Are there any contraindications? Yes, of course. So if you're pregnant, have a pacemaker, heart disease, and epilepsy, you should really consult your physician before you use MagHealy. Do I need to drink water before and after use? And water is always very, very important. You, of course, should drink 1 liter of water within 4 hours before use in order to be sufficient hydrated. So drink good amounts of water. And additionally, at least half a liter or quart after the application. So I always say drink at least 1 glass of water before and 1 glass of water after the application. That's the minimum you should do. If you drink more, good. And if you drink really clear, high quality water, even better. And as you can see here, don't drink caffeine or alcohol or something. That's not hydrating. That's dehydrating usually. So doesn't help. And of course, we also did a study for the McMakin applications. And there we also, again, did the quality of life and the decrease in concerns. And we had, again, almost a very large effect for the well-being and a very large effect for concerns. And we used the brain harmony program and the vagus harmony program. And I really can recommend you the brain harmony program, because this one is really, really, let's put it like, yeah, harmonizing. If you are a little distressed or stressed out, or yeah, even to the point that you can't bear it anymore, use the brain harmony program. Just lay down, put the MagHealy on your stomach, and enjoy the program. I use this a lot for my father, for example. He's really like overwhelmed sometimes with the life challenges, and there it really does wonders, small wonders. So that's about it. So now the question is, how much time we have? Still 20 minutes. So I could start with the third presentation, but I will skip some parts, maybe because I already told them. So here we have the usage of the MagHealy more in detail. So this we almost had everything. So we have 24 McMakin programs, which is basically we asked her, okay, give us the programs that everyone can do and everyone should have. And there she gave us those 24 programs. And yeah, they're really, really nice. Of course, you have local applications also for joints or lower back. So lower back I can also recommend. And digestion, of course. And of course, non-local like for the stomach usually. This is the protocol, an example protocol, uh, which of course can be used easily. So there you have morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and before sleep. So before sleep, you can do 2 times a week the sleep program. And evening, vagus harmony is very good, or brain harmony, also very good. You have the digestion program. And of course, detox in the morning. That's also always good. Drink a lot in the morning. Clear water, warm clear water would be ideal. So 40 degrees. And of course, from time to time, some emotion and body comfort. And this was just the first week. The second week, you also do detox. And in the evening, you basically switch between brain harmony, emotions, and sleep, and vagus harmony. And you have some nerve harmony and detox. And yeah, that's basically about it. And here you have some combinations. So you can, of course, also drink informed water. So you basically inform your water and drink it before the application. That's a way to do it. And there you can, of course, always combine body comfort with energy, digestion with bioenergetic cleansing or nutrition transport, brain harmony with mental clarity, detox with cell harmony, vagus harmony, sleep with sleep or after stress, emotions, with bioenergetic cleansing after exercise, with bioenergetic regeneration, and nerve harmony with cell harmony. So those are just suggestions. Of course, you need to find your combination that actually fits what you need right now. Now we have the classic application. So what lies behind the classic application? So for the classic applications, we basically looked at all the studies out there and what basically magnetic field devices are doing, and we put it in one program group. Those are more or less the proven effects of magnetic fields. Yeah, and of course, one is of course the Schumann frequency, which is quite important. And of course, you have again local and systemic programs. So this is a small guide. So there you always can do in the morning vitality, then energy circulation, cell harmony, and regeneration in the evening, which is also quite important. Then we go to the atmosphere programs. So for the atmosphere programs, maybe interesting is that a magnetic vector potential field is resonating with space and matter. So what does that mean? So at the end of the day, a magnetic field, of course, also penetrates the air. And if you have your air and all the energies that are in the air, you can, of course, also optimize and harmonize this basically room field that you have, the field in the room. And that's what you do with the atmosphere programs. You don't have a direct effect on the body usually, but a direct effect on the whole bioenergetic field of the room, or the energetic field of the room. I mean, bioenergetic more applies to living organisms, but the energetic field of the room. Yeah, and a question that's often asked. So now if I use an atmosphere program and it creates frequencies which are analyzed for me, what are with the other persons in the room? And actually that's a combination. So if the other persons in the room are open to those magnetic field frequencies, the MagHealy will of course analyze the frequencies that are good for both persons or all the persons in the room. Yeah, and of course, if you have those subtle structures of coherent water in the body, those usually are said also to properly correspond with the meridian system. Yeah, this is not so important. We switch. Yeah, and of course, if you have quantum analyzed frequencies, it's somehow you can visualize the effect, or think of the effect as uh, yeah, tuning your bioenergetic system. So it's like an instrument that you basically need to tune a little from time to time, that you play harmonically again. And that's also true for our emotions, for our psychological health, and for our body health, that all those very complex elements that we have that make up our body and our bioenergetic field in this case especially, that they are in harmony. So sometimes you have a little too much here, sometimes a little too much there, and you need the right frequency to basically rebalance those things. Yeah, and of course, if you are into um, Feng Shui, or also Vedic version of it, then of course you know about the quality of the room energy, and that of course the room itself can also be seen as a vibrating system, and it can be coherent or it can also be disharmonic. And of course, what we want is we want a coherent room. And this somehow, of course, also corresponds to the concepts of chi and prana. So there's a special energy in the room. And there you can, of course, also use, as a small example, if you have a spot in your room where you say, okay, always when I sit there, doesn't feel good, you can, of course, put the MagHealy there and run the coherence program. Or you are a little more in detail and know exactly what, let's say, part of your room stands for what, and then you can put things or use McHealy programs in the right space for that. And for example, the Northeast holds a special significance. So North and East, or Northeast, are especially suitable for water. Yeah, and the east and the north of the room should, of course, be light and open. So if you are more interested in that, really deep dive in some Feng Shui and use your MagHealy at the right spot in your room or in your house, of course. Yeah, and of course, what you also should do and could do is, you can have creativity, family harmony, relationships. So really try to support those things properly. Same for plants and animal harmony. So if you see, okay, something doesn't feel good, or I really want to uh, get a positive energy here, use the right programs. It really has a nice effect. And here you have a guideline again. So you can, for example, in the morning, you can immediately start your energy program and energize the whole room. You can also see that you start electrosensitivity when you're, of course, in a hotel room. Or, of course, you can use coherence everywhere. And for evening relaxation, of course, makes sense. And holistic health, so you get in a regenerative, basically, mood. That also makes a lot of sense. And last but not least, water. So water is the cradle of life, as you usually say, and water has 41 anomalies, and of course our body is mostly water. So this is something that especially comes in handy if you talk about the theory of coherent domains of water. So if you deep dive into this, you will not come around Emilio de Giudici or Chuck Benveniste or Luc Montagnier. So they are really specialists on those complex frequency patterns that are stored in water. And of course, water is quite sensitive to external electromagnetic vibrations. And of course, those can then be transmitted into biological organisms. So we basically can use both effects in a different way. So one effect that we can basically influence water when we inform drinking water and drink it, or since we are made of water, we inform our water directly. So you have, for once, the frequencies that basically have a certain effect on certain parts of the organism, and simply frequencies that have a certain effect on the water itself and basically restructure the water. So it's a very, very interesting topic. Yeah, and of course you can make a whole drinking bottle of water also in that format. So that's also a common question. So how long does the information stay on the water? And this is not so easy to answer, but as a guideline, you could say there's constant electromagnetic fields, light, and energy, basically, in whatever form, reaching the water. And you inform your water with the MagHealy, and it has a certain, let's say, restructuring effect on the water. And the longer you leave it, the more other, basically, influences are changing the water again in a way you don't want it, maybe. So maybe you use it for one day and then you make it new. So just imagine that something lies there for a longer time and gets old. Like if you have, for example, a fruit, the longer you leave it, the more deviating it is from the original state you bought it. So I think that's the main thing you always should keep in mind. And here's also a nice guideline. So usually you want to have a detox effect in the morning, and that can be, of course, done with kidney harmony. And then, of course, cell harmony in the noon, and in the evening, vagus harmony. So vagus harmony is always quite relaxing usually. And of course, when you eat a lot at noon, nutrition transport makes a lot of sense. And that's about it. So we covered also the last topic. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck on your way to holistic health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. Really, it was really eye-opening to learn all about this interesting information, but as always, and it's not possible to deny the effects of the magnetic fields after learning all these informations, right? And it's amazing how also MagHealy supports us by using all these technology and principles. I would like to thank all the participants for taking the time today and for being here. I'm sure you are now feeling more well equipped for your McHealy deals. So yeah, until next time, take care of yourselves and we wish you all a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.